up the butt. Patience, determination.
Very nice. And then what is the 2-4 out of the box?
I wanna do whatever you want me to do
Nice.
today. I
A little bit of
wanna
fishing over our
say whatever you want me to say.
Set that hook a little faster.
Okay.
You gotta be careful with these 7 gills. Push off of the net and get back out and exposed.
Everything
So
you
soon
love, anything you
Much thicker
want,
body.
everything you have, 'cause I will smash and grab.
Hey, what's up guys? You're here today with Nick the Informative Fisherman, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to spool up a spinning reel and also how to prevent line twists. Let's get started. Okay, now what you need to get started is your reel and your line spool. Now you can see I've taken my reel off of the rod, and the reason for this is I want to know which way my bail is rotating so I can match up the line memory that comes off the spool to my reel. And what line memory is, if you ever made a cast out there, you'll see those loops in your line. That's the line memory. So how you spool it onto your reel is very crucial. So what I'm going to simply do here is tilt my reel forward and start to rotate the handle. And I can see that it's traveling in this fashion here, which is counterclockwise. So I want to make sure the line coming off of my line spool is going counterclockwise to fasten itself to my reel properly. So here what I've done, I've just taken my line spool and I've grabbed the line coming off of it, and I'm going to just start to lift it up to see which way the line is traveling and coming off of that line spool. And this is actually coming off clockwise. So if I were to put this through the first eye on my rod right now and start to retrieve this onto my reel, it would be incorrect. So what I actually want to do to make sure this line comes off properly is I'm going to simply put that back on there, flip my spool over, now start to lift up the line, and there it is, it's coming off counterclockwise. So this would be the correct way to spool up my reel. So I've placed my reel back onto my rod. So at this point, all I want to simply do is open my baling wire here, lay my rod down, just like so. I like to keep my bail up so it doesn't close itself, and grab that line coming off of the spool, and I'm just going to reach up, stick it through the first eye on my rod, and bring it back right to the spool on my reel. So now, all I'm going to do is take my line, go right around my spool, and tie a simple overhand knot, and fasten that down to my spool. And I'm going to follow it with another overhand knot. I know you're probably wondering, why such a basic knot? Well, the reason for this is the knot lays extremely flat. And yes, a basic overhand knot, if a fish does put a lot of tension on it and you get down to the bottom of your spool, that line will slip. But I'm going to leave a pretty good tag in the line on here. So what I'm going to do at this point is close my bail, grab that little tag end of line, and bring my clippers in here and cut it off. Now I've actually left just under a 1/4 inch of line for my tag end, and the reason for this is that line slippage. So now it's going right behind my guide here onto my spool, and I have a fairly good amount of tag in the line left on there. At this point I'm simply going to pick up my rod, pinch the line between my index and my thumb, place the butt of the rod on my hip, and gradually start to wind the line right back onto the reel there. And I'm keeping a slight amount of pressure between my index and my thumb. And the reason for this is I don't want the line to go on completely free with no tension, because a lot of the time that'll get a little loose line on your reel, and that can cause line twist as well. So a slight pinch right between your index and your thumb is good. And a good way to test to see if it's going on there correctly is to back off the pressure. If the line's not lifting up off of your reel spool, you've got it on correctly. So I'm going to keep on spooling it. And if you can see, the line coming off of the line spool, going through the first eye on my rod here, there's no twist. You can see a slight bend in the line, but there's no twist in it. So that also means it's going on correctly. And a lot of the time, if you start to spool up incorrect at first, yeah, you may have a little bit of line twist towards the bottom of your spool, but at this point you can simply flip that back over as well. Now, as you can see, I put my line on only about halfway up on the spool there. And the reason for this is if you put too much line onto your spool and you get a little bit of loose line coming back on, it'll have a tendency to work its way over the top of that lip. And by going just over halfway, it gives you a good block for loose line not to start slipping off of your reel, which will lead to those little loops right here in your spool, and that could be a real hassle. Okay, so I've simply just clipped it off on my line spool, tied it onto my first eye, and we're set to go. Now, what I was talking about when it comes to line twist, that's overspooling your reel will often lead to that. Casting very light lures into the wind or light rubber grubs into the wind will start to build up a lot of loose line on there. So what another thing you can do is strip off a lot of line, put that pressure back between your index and your thumb, and retrieve that line back on there with a little bit of pressure. And that'll take out a lot of those little annoying loops that are in there, or too loose of line that can lead to backlash and line twist. Now, another key element, after your cast, your bail's open. I see a lot of guys just start to reel to close the bail. And what happens is, when you do that, there's a loose loop that goes in there. About the first inch is loose. And what's going to happen is when you start to retrieve, you're going to have a little loose line built up in there, and that can lead to line twist on your next couple of casts. So instead of starting to reel manually to close the bail, after your cast, you make your cast out there. You don't have to be looking at it. You can just reach right under, close the bail with your hand, then start to retrieve. And that'll prevent a lot of line twist as well. And that's spooling a spinning reel with Nick the Informative Fisherman. We'll see you next time.